Hi, my name is Kristen Chrisman, and we're going to continue. We'll call this Peacemaking 105. Second facet of solutions. We've been talking about solutions to violence according to the Paradigm for Peace model, which has 3 facets. First facet, mental tools of human development, which we just talked about. We'll talk about this now. Second facet of justice, legal tools of justice. And then the third facet of physical tools of physical control. So second facet, legal tools of justice. And I'm going to talk about the most important ones. There are many legal tools that could help correct the current problem and prevent future problems. Let me set my timer here so I don't run overboard. The very first legal tool that I have here is forbid U.S. fossil fuel and weapon industry involvement in the Black, Caspian, Arctic, and South China Seas. Now, U.S. policymakers always talk about being so tough and strong. Well, if they're tough and strong, then do this. Or are they going to start crying about that? Are they too weak to do that? That's what they've got to do. Because that's really blowing up conflict. It's blowing up conflict with Russia and with China. Their insistence on getting their hands on fossil fuel under everybody else's oceans and soil. And it's just ridiculous. Okay? Give it a rest. Maybe the other thing is, with climate change going on, why are they even doing that? It's ridiculous. They have got to, we should just forbid them from fossil fuels and the weapon industry. We do not need weapons sent into those regions. I know the weapon industry is like so excited about this. I've read that about, oh, they're excited about the growth in the market around in the South Pacific and Vietnam. Oh boy, you know, conflict. It's disgusting. Forbid fossil fuel and weapon industry involvement in the Black Sea, Caspian Sea, Arctic Sea, and South China Seas. Next, stop using U.S. tax dollars to fund fossil fuel, nuclear, and weapon development. We shouldn't be subsidizing them. The government is supposed to be serving the general public. We are not supposed to be serving the fossil fuel, nuclear, and weapon industries. But that's what's happening. It's I'd call it kleptocracy. Sarah Shays writes about kleptocracy. They're getting their hands on all these U.S. tax dollars. That money is for our development, and fossil fuels, nuclear weapons, nuclear energy, and weapons, all this are not helping us. Maybe we want some weapons, but we have them. We have plenty. Okay? We don't need any more. Next, do not submerge the U.S. foreign policy mission. Okay, and it's being submerged, I'd say, in 3 ways. 1, it's being submerged to the mission of corporations to earn profits, especially weapon, fossil fuels, nuclear. 2nd, it's being submerged to the personal interests of policymakers who have investments in those corporations. And 3rd, as I mentioned when we talked about the escalators of violence, it's being submerged by the missions of the Department of Defense and the CIA. As I said, when the Department of Defense develops a military plan and strategies, or when the CIA does some surveillance to check on, say, weapons inspections, they're doing their job. That's part of their mission. But the problem is, their missions should not be driving U.S. foreign policy. U.S. foreign policy has got to be much bigger than that. And that's the problem. That's why, after 9/11, you had smart people saying, oh my God, I got to waterboard this guy, or we're going to have another 9/11. Because they only think in terms of their own department's missions and how they get information. I talk in my work about constructive intelligence and destructive intelligence. Destructive intelligence is what the CIA does. It's intelligence that's gained by spying or by torture, and it's used to outfox the enemy or to kill the enemy, sabotage the enemy's plan. Okay? Now there's some benefit to a little bit of that, right? To make sure nobody's sneaking up on you. A little bit of that. But it's totally the only kind of intelligence. Constructive intelligence is gained in a friendly way. You talk to people, you talk to Putin, you talk to Iraqis, you talk to North and South Koreans and find out what is their perspective, what bothers them, what are their fears, what are their hopes, what ideas do they have. And you use constructive intelligence to cooperatively create peace and justice, goodness, friendships. If we had a U.S. Department of Peace, we could be focusing on that. Because as I said in another video, even the Department of State doesn't do that either. The U.S. Department of State is more like a non-violent form of the Department of Defense. It's not this cooperative, from what I've read of their mission statements, and from the remarks I hear coming from them over the years, it's not this cooperative, constructive intelligence, let's make peace and justice together kind of thing. It's a, the U.S. knows what it's doing, and you listen to us and you like us, and we're going to make you like us. So do not submerge the U.S. foreign policy mission to those groups. Next, require a sound decision-making process with a comprehensive exchange of information with the public regarding war, proxy war, weapon shipments and sales, and weapon manufacturing. I mean, I don't know about you, it's just a farce when they call this a democracy, for many reasons. But especially when you hear about Biden, oh, we're going to send weapons, and don't worry, Americans, we're sending more weapons. You know, and I write a legislator saying, don't send weapons, and he writes me back saying, oh, don't worry, I'm sending weapons. They don't listen. They don't ask. We have no voice. The government is supposed to serve at the consent of the governed. It's not. So there should be, first of all, a sound decision-making process within government, which actually I've written up in my unpublished works, and that it should involve a comprehensive exchange of information with the public, not this one-sided propaganda. An exchange of information. They're giving information to the public, public's giving information to them. I mean, I can't even get through to them with the information I have. They're like all walled off. And it should be about war, proxy war, which is going on right now. I mean, that's Biden and his group there should not have all this power to do whatever the hell they want. Okay, same with weapon shipments. We should be in on this decision making, and not we, brainwashed we, but we who have comprehensive information about this. And weapon manufacturing. What business do they have making nuclear weapons, which they should never use, and which they don't, as far as I know, they don't plan on using, although now I think maybe they are planning on using it because they've been trying to create new ones, like low-level ones that aren't as dangerous. You know, only like half of us will get cancer and deformed limbs instead of all of us. So the next, I have one more sheet here. Here's that sheet. And I'll show these all in a final video also. And I'll try to type these up and send them to countercurrents.org because they've been posting all my essays. And then one more sheet of my top second facet solutions to the current crisis, which will help prevent other conflicts. Prohibit U.S. policymaker personal investments in weapons, nuclear, private military contractor, and fossil fuel industries. When you think of Hunter Biden, he was like on the board of Burisma Holdings, the largest natural gas company in Ukraine. What the heck is he doing there? And doesn't that affect foreign policy? Same with, I mentioned Blinken with his West Exec Advisors, and Austin was on Raytheon's company. I mean, so many people up there, so many of them are thick in these investments, and they're making, it's the profits they're making that can drive their mind, and also it's the social circles that they're in that make them think only of certain priorities in life, and it's like it blots out huge sections of their brains so they can't think comprehensively. Vigorously promote non-nuclear, non-fossil fuel forms of energy and transportation. Americans have been wanting this for decades. Are Americans so stupid that they can't come up with this by now? No, they're not stupid. So what's holding this back? Perhaps the fact that our tax dollars subsidize the fossil fuel industry and the nuclear industry. See, it shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be that way at all. Forbid all campaign contributions. Publicly fund all campaigns for office equally. People have been talking about this for decades, how unfair it is. It doesn't change. It's got to change. You can't call it democratic when it's money that buys your office, when it's somebody's lobby who decides whether you're going to win or lose. Enforce international law. Now there's a big one. It would help if the U.S. joined the International Criminal Court. And that's something Putin spoke about in his Munich speech, which got him into trouble with the U.S. How the U.S. does not follow international law. And that people, he said, nobody feels safe because international law cannot protect them. It's not enforced. And again, international law, so some people say, oh, that international law shouldn't be bossing the U.S. national law around. But you know what? International law protects individuals. It not only protects nations from other nations, it protects individuals from national governments. International government can protect American individuals from a U.S. national government that's going after them. It can protect individuals around the world from a national government that's going after them. International law is, so far, is a good thing. I mean, it's possible that could get corrupted too. Prosecute U.S. presidents and top officials for violations of international law, including invasions, coups, torture, detention, drones, and lies. It's disgusting how president after president gets away with violating the law. Even when Nixon was impeached, it was for lying and for national political problems, crimes he'd done. But it wasn't about the coup in Chile. Why not? He should have been prosecuted for that. That was much, much bigger offense. I mean, death followed, not just the death of Salvador Allende. Tens of thousands of people died and were tortured by the regime that was put in place and supported and armed by the U.S. That type of stuff should be prosecuted. It's embarrassing being an American, and it's shameful. It really affects how you feel. And people, some people might say to me, oh, if you don't like it, move. I'd be happy to move to another country. I've looked into it. But the immigration laws are very difficult to get into other places. And plus, you leave your family and friends. What do you do with the pets? They can't all travel. It's very hard. It's not easy. Some people just say, oh, if you don't like it, leave. That's very heartless and impractical. If people want to send me money to move, then fine. But I think a better solution is to make the country a better place so that more people like living in it and feel proud to be Americans. Plus, if we move to another country, we have to worry about getting bombed by the U.S. there. Shrink NATO infrastructure and capability to levels of 1997, when NATO-Russia Founding Act was signed. And this, actually, I got right out of one of Putin's speeches. And it's a good idea. He's saying 1997, there was a NATO-Russia Founding Act. This was before Czechoslovakia, or the Czech Republic and Slovakia, before all the Slavic nations joined NATO. NATO had promised not to move an inch east from Germany. If the Soviet Union or Russia left Germany, NATO promised not to move east, and it did. And it also violated several other treaties by moving east. We should be shrinking it back. We would not be in the mess we're in now if it had not expanded. Create a U.S. Department of Peace. This will help prevent the U.S. foreign policy mission from being submerged to the missions of the Department of Defense, CIA, the corporations, and to the individual profit interests of policymakers. Now, just because you have a U.S. Department of Peace doesn't mean everything's solved, because you could have the same problems of competition, rivalry, turf wars, lies right in the department. So, in fact, when I have my diagram here, I didn't explain this. This triangle represents first facet. This triangle represents second facet. This triangle represents the third facet. But notice how you have an inner triangle and an outer triangle. The outer triangle represents how you interact with those outside your organization, outside your country. But the inner triangle represents how you interact with those within your organization. So, for example, U.S. Department of Peace, it wants to behave positively, maturely, and cooperatively with other nations, but within itself, it also has to have the human dynamics of the nurturant model, of Alport's democratic personality, of Spranger's, not his political lenses, but like the theoretical lenses would be good, the social lenses. He has 6 different lenses he talks about. And the wise ego, the integrated mature ego. You want to have all the psychological maturity within your organization and within the Department of Peace. Lastly, greatly curtail or eliminate the CIA and the National Endowment for Democracy. Now, some people say just eliminate them. I don't know enough about them to say whether some of the things they're doing are important. Now, as I said, I mean, some espionage makes sense, right? So you're not caught. You want to be aware of what other people are doing if somebody's sneaking up on you. But I don't know to what extent the Department of Defense does that anyway. So if that job's already being covered by the Department of Defense, maybe we wouldn't need the CIA at all. But I don't know. It'd be important to talk about. Same with National Endowment for Democracy. I've read many things about how terrible they are in promoting economic and political unrest, which leads to coups. And it's actually not democracy they're promoting. It's U.S. policymaker interests, investments, the market economy. But maybe there are some things that organization does that really are good and that are impartial. You don't want things that are partial, just siding with one side abroad. Again, you want that 360-degree empathy. So that's the second facet, legal tools of justice. And it looks like I have time to do the third facet, which is physical tools of physical control. Now, these tools could be non-violent, such as locking your windows and doors. That's a physical way to protect yourself from violence, but it's non-violent. They could include non-lethal weapons, although some of them, I read, are worse than the lethal ones. So you have to be careful of that and very intelligent about their use. And then it could also include violent weapons. But the problem is the violence is so overused. It's nearly a first resort. So my very first solution here is abolish and dismantle nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons immediately, today. What kind of message would that send to Russia if Biden announced that, you know what, we're going to, well, I don't know if he has the authority to do this, we may need Congress to do it, if we started dismantling them right now. Say, hey, we've gone overboard, we don't need 4,000 nukes, especially since we're never going to use them, and especially since the manufacture of them creates radiation. We have waste from them which creates radiation, which is killing us, and they might go off accidentally, which would kill us, or give us cancer and deformities, and destroy our DNA. I mean, it's not like, oh, if we dismantle them, now we're at risk. That's not true at all. We should dismantle them today. Next, work for an international ban on aircraft bombs and drones. William Bloom wrote about the bombs dropping from airplanes. Why aren't they considered weapons of mass destruction? Can you imagine the horror? Like when you're in a thunderstorm or something, or if you hear a plane flying overhead. Imagine if it were a bomb. that were being dropped, or if you had to fear that, it's inhumane. Where are our standards? They should not be allowed at all. So that's something I'm saying work for an international ban on, because if the U.S. just decided that unilaterally, maybe that could create repercussions where somebody tries to take advantage of the U.S. or something. So work internationally for it. Greatly curtail U.S. weapon exports of both U.S. government foreign military and direct commercial sales. Because there's two types of sales. One is U.S. government to other government, and one is U.S. corporations to other governments. Those are called direct commercial sales. But even those require approval by, from what I've read, by the Department of State in consultation with the Department of Defense. Although I think under Obama was trying to do this, and then Trump was trying to do this, and I think he succeeded in getting some of these approvals moved over to another department. I think the Department of Commerce, perhaps, which would put even less oversight over it. Obviously, there isn't much oversight anyway. So many weapons get transferred. I mean, handguns, like to the Philippines, which is just, the violence over there is horrible. And under the dictator, so many people are just killed in the streets. But the government approves, saying, oh yeah, send these weapons, no problem. We have to greatly curtail weapon exports. Oh, is that too hard for the weapon industry to take? Well, if you're so tough, you better handle that. See, they create all these tough weapons. Well, where's their toughness of their spirit and courage and mind? You know, where's the toughness of their sense of morality? And, as I say, where are the social and environmental impact statements of all these weapons? There aren't any. Where are the evaluations that these weapons are actually helping? Where's the evidence? Because if there is no evidence that these weapons are actually building a better world or better communities, then believing in these weapons is just a matter of faith, which means it's a religion. It's a pseudo-religion. And we should not have to support any religion with our taxes, right? Forbid weapon sales that could possibly jeopardize nonviolent conflict resolution. Like right now in Ukraine. And it's happened elsewhere, like in Syria. There are nonviolent conflict resolution groups. Something I would enjoy being a part of. Many of you would enjoy being a part of. So here, picture, here we are working on nonviolent ideas. Yeah, we're working with that group, with the so-called enemy. We're coming up with ideas, solutions. And then meanwhile, the U.S. is sending weapons to one side, so that those people over there who believe in violence can start shooting at us. That messes up our nonviolent dialogue we're having. It's allowing the people who believe in violence to dominate the people who believe in nonviolence. That's not democratic. Give the Pentagon and NATO a sense of purpose by redirecting their entire missions to nonviolent cooperative conflict resolution, natural disaster and climate rescue, with military ops and espionage only a small unit. Now, I'm not sure how the idea of redirecting their entire missions to nonviolent cooperative conflict resolution would go along with having a U.S. Department of Peace. Like, I don't know if they would overlap too much. So that's something to think about. But I know that the Pentagon, I mean, NATO, perhaps we could just, or perhaps curtail it or eliminate it. That's another choice. But say, especially the Pentagon, though, they need a sense of purpose, from what I've read. And instead of getting a sense of purpose out of each war that comes up, or trying to create more need for its military, I think giving it a nonviolent cooperative conflict resolution purpose would be great. I remember reading in Sarah Shea's book about, in Afghanistan, the punishment of virtue. She was speaking with a man in the military who was down in a foxhole, and he said, what would really help here? And she said, if you could build, there's a certain road that needed to be built. She said, if you could build that road, that would really help the Afghans. And he said, I'd really like to get out of this foxhole, I feel so stupid, and build that road. He wanted to do something constructive. And you hear that from other people in the military. They feel good when they do a negotiation or when they solve a problem, when they help people. A lot of these people aren't there because they want to kill. I would think most people don't want to kill, frankly, in the military. I think they want to help, and they want to serve, and they want to be noble. But the way for them to serve and be noble is with the nonviolent conflict resolution. You know, without any guns at all. But then have a small part of the military, relatively small, being devoted to the military ops. I mean, you still want to have an army and navy. But that's my suggestion. And also with a shift toward natural disaster and climate rescue. Give them, and even also rescue of animals. Environmental rescue, say from poachers. And that could also involve nonviolent conflict resolution, where you're trying to give the poachers another source of income. I mean, some of them, I think, are starving. And they're trying to feed their families. But it's awful what they're doing. So that's the first page. And then here's my second page, my top third facet solutions. The first one is, this is all about expand and specify in greater detail the criteria for a just war, proxy war, and weapon exports. And all these are the criteria that I came up with, and I write about them at length in the unpublished works, but I'll mention them here. First of all, one of the criteria should be, and not just for war, but for the proxy wars too, and for weapon exports, merit of goals. Now right now the criteria is something like there should be just cause. It's so easy for a president or Congress member to say, oh yeah, there's just cause, there's this, look at that, save them from torture from Saddam Hussein, you know. But I say not just cause, but merit of goals, plural. You have to look at all of the goals. Are they all noble and just goals, and are they fair? And also, there has to be an absence of unjust goals. So when Biden sends weapons to Ukraine, is he trying to get a foothold in the Black Sea fossil fuels? No? Then prove it. Prove that that's not a goal. Is Biden trying to get a military foothold on the Black Sea for NATO or the U.S.? No? Then prove it. Let's look at all the evidence. Could that be an unjust goal behind this? And if there is an unjust goal, then you can't have war or proxy war or weapon shipments. Next, require social, psychological, and environmental impact statements ahead of time. And also, I would suggest doing it for past wars or for current wars. What were the social, psychological, and environmental impacts of Bush's invasion of Iraq? The policymakers just always talk about such dry terms, like who's in power. And they don't talk about the psychology. What happened to the people? Do they have PTSD? Did they get borderline personality disorder? That's from, in a nutshell, when you have a real sensitive type of individual. Sensitive in terms of all their senses. They can smell, touch, hear, everything more sensitively. And even with the thinking, it's more sensitive to complexities and details. It's very important to have this type of personality in our society. But these people, when exposed to trauma, get especially harmed by it mentally. And they can get borderline personality disorder with the identity shifting, with extreme levels of anxiety, with a sense of emptiness. It's just awful. Environmental goals. What happened to the animal life in Iraq? And the plants, the air, the water, all of that. Don't just gloss over it. You know, and what happened to the people who lost their mom or their dad or their brother or their child? How are they feeling now? We need impact statements. And what happened to the community, to the trust within the apartment building? I read in Deborah Ellis's book, I think it's called Children of War, about the Iraqi refugees, where one child is saying how everyone in their apartment, they used to have a sense of trust, but now they don't trust each other anymore. They don't know who's on what side. When you break down trust, where's your capacity for peace? That's what war does. It destroys it. It pulverizes it. We need to look at this. We need to know what's done. We need to predict it. Okay, Biden, if you keep sending weapons to Ukraine instead of allowing Russia to protect Donetsk and Lugansk from the ultranationalists and the Kiev government and the neo-Nazis. Russia wasn't going in there with a huge operation. It was a limited military operation. They were not trying to destroy the country. They were just trying to protect those people there. But when Biden keeps sending weapons, gee, Russia's going to need more weapons. Oh, Russia's going to have to drop some forces now. What's this doing to the Ukrainians? To the environment, to the psychology, to the social climate? It's messing it all up. We need to have these statements. Okay, there needs to be a net gain for goodness. Not only that, on all sides of conflict. Okay, first of all, what's goodness? It's not just, oh, we got him out of power, isn't that good? No, it means an increase in love in the communities and country. An increase in joy, happiness, safety, feelings of safety in the neighborhood. I've read in a book, I forget which one it was, about Iraq, by Zara Ali. The person says, I think that was the book, they said that we used to fear Saddam Hussein. Now there's a Saddam Hussein on every street corner because of the U.S. invasion and occupation. So goodness, and who's going to decide what's goodness? And also, when you do a net gain, you have to look at the pros and cons. So the pros are the goodness. And who's going to decide what the cons are? You've got to look at the psychological cons, the environmental cons, the cons to the children, to the cons to all future generations of people. How good will this child be at parenting the next generation because of what the U.S. did? So you've got to look at the net gain for goodness both on this side and on that side. Is there a net gain for goodness on both sides? Okay, there has to be a net gain for goodness, or you can't do this war or this proxy war or these weapon exports. But that's just one criteria. The next criteria, another criteria is compare the net gain of goodness, if there is one, to alternative, nonviolent approaches to achieve each goal. So say one goal is to eliminate torture in Iraq. Saddam Hussein was guilty of much torture in the prisons. Okay, so if we invade, get rid of Saddam Hussein and everybody, we're hoping to get rid of torture. First of all, it didn't get rid of torture. It caused more torture because everybody was upset and angry and not trusting and freaking out. Okay, but even if it had gotten rid of torture, was there another way to get rid of torture? Could we have perhaps given Saddam Hussein the security that, okay, we're not going to try to get rid of you in a coup. We're not going to arm the Kurds against you. Okay, we're not going to do anything to topple you, but we want you to stop the torture. Do you agree to that? Maybe he would have agreed. Or let's talk about other ways to deal with why is this torture going on? What's the anxiety causing it? What's the belief? Do you believe that this will actually cure these people? Let's have some discussion about whether torture or not actually causes people to commit more violence or less violence. What about an educational approach to eliminate torture? What about role modeling to prevent torture, huh? And it's the same. Now, frankly, I don't see any goal, noble goal, that the U.S. has in this proxy war. So I can't even think of an example of would there be an alternative way to reach that goal. Certainly, say, defending lives in the Civil War. Okay, is sending weapons actually protecting lives? No, it's actually creating a bigger war. If you want to protect lives, why not support the Minsk agreements that Russia was trying to do? Why not push the Ukrainian leaders to support them also? Which involved giving Donetsk and Lugansk some autonomy within Ukraine and guarantees that they would not be harassed and injured by Kiev's government. Another criteria for just war. Oh, and let me back up to say, I'm not in favor of war at all. But I think it's good to have criteria for just war. And this is why. Because some people do believe that war is necessary. So if we don't have criteria, first of all, they'll put less credit into what I'm even talking about, because they'll think, oh, I'm so unreasonable. And second of all, actually, it is theoretically possible that a war sometimes is necessary. You can imagine some kind of theoretical situation in which you're actually being invaded by truly evil people trying to take over your country. Okay, you need war. So let's have some criteria for them. It actually is rational to have criteria, I think, for a just war. And I'm hoping that with the criteria, going through the criteria can help the policymakers come up with actually alternative solutions to war. Except in that crazy theoretical situation where you're actually being invaded, okay? Next criteria, competent, legitimate authority guided by truthful, cooperative quest discussion. Competent authority. We don't have that right now. We have warmongers. We have neoconservatives and liberal hawks, liberal interventionists making these policies. It's not democratic, it's not truly representative, and it's not competent. I'm sure they're talented in some ways, and intelligent in some ways, but they have the same blind spots. They have the same vision, and they have the same blind spots, where they don't know how to do cooperative nonviolent resolution. They don't know how to empathize with the so-called enemy's fears. And legitimate authority. And I don't consider the authority legitimate if the elections aren't legitimate. And they're not legitimate if we don't get a truly representative slate of candidates who represent social circles outside the social circles that are warped. Next, truthful, comprehensive exchange of information and perspectives with the public. Again, comprehensive and truthful, 360 degrees of information, and exchange back and forth. Oh, and the one prior to this, when I mentioned truthful cooperative quest discussion, within the government, not this top-down, you listen to me, or you're a Republican, you've got to do what the Republicans say, you're a Democrat, you've got to do what the Democrats say. That's authoritarianism. What happened to democracy? Okay, cooperative dialogue supports democracy. Forced unity supports authoritarianism. What do these American policymakers stand for? Next, it has to be a last resort. A president being tired, wanting to go out to play golf, throwing up his hands in fatigue, does not mean it's a last resort. Now, in my unpublished works, I have hundreds of steps to take, and I think every one of those steps should be taken. Certainly all of these solutions should be taken, these steps, before war is ever even thought about. It should be a very last resort where you've tried everything. You're like a hero, on a cliff, struggling for that branch, struggling to reach it, and I gotta reach it and pull myself up. Gotta get to the top like that for the non-violent solutions. That's courage and strength, not this bam, bam, you're dead. Oh, you're so brave and macho, That is dumb. And these people on the phone send the bombs. Oh, yeah, you're so strong and brave. We just loved you, Last criteria I have on here, and maybe you guys have more criteria. I put a lot of thought into these, and I write about them in my works. But maybe there's more. Or maybe you would modify this in some way. High probability of success based on logic and planning of steps, including post-conflict steps. Again, my hope is if they think through the steps, they'll start saying, wait a minute, this isn't really going the way we want to. Because look, this or that could happen. If we get rid of Saddam Hussein, maybe there would be less torture, but maybe there would be more torture because people will freak out. Okay, I don't mean freak out understandably they would freak out from fear and from different groups taking control. When you start planning the steps carefully, you realize, wait, maybe war won't work. Or even if they think, okay, this will work, when they get to the post-conflict steps, they might realize, you know, we can take these post-conflict steps without the war. Like, say we want to have some prejudice reduction programs between the ethnic groups. You know, we can do that now. In fact, from what I've read in Iraq, there wasn't a lot of ethnic conflict. But the war has brought it out. And I also say high probability of success based on logic because of some of the absurd things people say, like, say, with the Iraq invasion. I remember reading some high official in the U.S. was saying how, oh, people develop antibodies from living under a dictatorship, where they won't put up with a dictatorship anymore. As if the reason dictatorships exist is because people put up with them. Nobody wants a dictatorship. Dictatorships come about from lots of tension. Tension between groups, lack of trust, fear that you're going to get killed unless you're a dictator. And sometimes it can come about from the individual having like this power mania type of problem, which could stem from personal psychological difficulties. So it doesn't, people don't get antibodies to dictatorships. It was just so stupid. Or to think that, I read one person said that there might be a wave, if we can get rid of Saddam Hussein, this will lead to a wave of democracy spreading throughout the Middle East. That's ridiculous. War does not create waves of democracy. It creates waves of violence and distrust. And it's the same here with what's going on in Ukraine. Well, what's the logic behind sending weapons? And then the latest thing they're saying, first of all, the U.S. media blamed Putin for being aggressive in an unquote unprovoked war. It was highly provoked. I feel Russia was being defensive, frankly. Very defensive. Russia had put up with so much with NATO coming east, you know, for years, saying we don't like this, we don't like this, we don't like this, we don't like this. And now the U.S. is saying, oh, you shouldn't be violent, you know, there are nonviolent ways. The Russia had been saying it for years, we don't like this, nonviolently. It wasn't listened to. But where was I? I was talking about Ukraine. What is Biden's plan? So then Putin doesn't attack with full force. And then people like infographics make fun of Putin in Russia. Oh, they're just incompetent. And I think it was in the New York Times. Oh, they're incompetent. Look at them. They weren't being incompetent. They were not coming out in full force because they weren't trying to destroy Ukraine. But the U.S. twisted it. Instead of saying, oh, Russia's not using its Air Force because it's trying to be humane, it said, oh, Russia's so incompetent. It should have used the Air Force like we did in the Persian Gulf War, you know, when we really killed them all with our kill ratio. And now, the latest thing is the U.S. is saying, oh, since Russia's not coming with full force, I guess we can send more weapons because they're not going to fight back. So, where's Biden going with this? He's just... the steps... it doesn't... first of all, he does not... the goals aren't there. The merit of the goals. There are unjust goals behind this. There's no planning of steps, no post-conflict steps, except steps of aggression to try to get a hold of the Black Sea. Okay, I have a few more minutes, so the last thing I'll say that I talk about in my unpublished works, connected with the criteria for a just war, proxy war, and weapon exports, are what I call Da Vinci standards. Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci was a highly sensitive individual, and with an astute mind, he created a drawing of a submarine 400 years before it ever existed. But he showed this drawing to nobody because he felt too many people are greedy and power hungry, and in their hands this submarine could cause a lot of damage. Let's get back to the Da Vinci standards. But instead we've got machine guns. They're just accepted as normal. Machine guns. How can you know that fast that all these people should be killed? They're all guilty. They're all dangerous. The only way to save ourselves is to kill them all. And we're right. It doesn't make sense. Not only then beyond the machine guns, you've got the bombs dropping from planes, cluster bombs. Nuclear bombs. Where are the sense of standards of humanity? It's gone monstrous. The minds have... It's as if people think we're killing monsters. And that's how the media writes it, too. In every single war, they paint the enemy as a monster. They falsely paint the media. Sure, they can find examples. Sometimes they make them up. You can find examples on both sides of people behaving like monsters. I mean, the atrocities. They're on every side. You can find that. But the bulk of the people are not like that. And also, those people wouldn't behave like that if they weren't put under such incredible fear. And the thing about war is, it lets loose your fear, your anxiety, and your self-hatred, where you let it out on others. You just go nuts, and you let it loose. That's what war brings out, the worst in everybody. So let's have some Da Vinci standards, which I say are outlaw, not just nuclear weapons. Outlaw high kill, clumsy kill, and future kill weapons. In other words, weapons that kill, like a nuclear weapon or a bomb, cluster, a landmine. When you put it there, it's going to kill off somebody in the future, or future generation. It's going to destroy their DNA. They're going to be born without a leg, you know, or without an eye. Outlaw wasteful uses of energy, money, and lives. You know, it just burns me up that we're all not supposed to be using these incandescent light bulbs anymore, or they had to be modified, and we're all supposed to be using these stupid LED lights. I hate them. Especially in car headlights, like they blind me, you know, so I'm going to drive into the tree. But, fluorescent lights, which buzz. It's just awful. So we're supposed to be saving energy, you know, by having these not having incandescent light bulbs, because they dare let off more heat, too much heat, instead of just light. Okay, what about these bombs? The big flashes of light, the sounds, the explosion, the craters in the earth. Isn't that a huge waste of energy? Yes. And when I say a wasteful use of energy, I'm not saying, oh, so let it kill more people. That shows that it's useful. Killing all that people, that's not useful at all. Think about the energy, the money, and the lives. How could that energy have been used differently? How could that money, how could that soldier's life have been used differently? Instead of killing those people, could we have trained him non-violently to go in there and help those people? Maybe help these people get along. Help these people dig a well. That's a better use of energy. Outlaw torture instruments and procedures. And I agree, anything can be used as an instrument of torture. Or a lot of things can. But let's at least outlaw the instruments and the procedures. Of course, international law already does outlaw that. Enforce geographical limitation. That's another thing where people have just lost all sense of proportion. Like, what happened to the word battlefield? A field where you do battle. You know, it's a certain spot. It's not in the neighborhood. That's ridiculous. And a boy, I think it was a little boy in Deborah Ellis's book about the Iraqi refugees said, or maybe it was a girl who said this, if Saddam Hussein and Bush Jr. had a problem, they should have just had a duel. Hey, I agree. Okay, and people have to say those things sometimes, but they're right. Let them have a chess match. Whoever wins, wins. What would we lose? We'd win a lot. Okay? And so let's have geographical limitations where if you're going to have war, you just wage it in this field over there. Okay? Or wage it on that military complex. Lastly, and another one, Da Vinci standard I made up, I call the CAW law. CAW. It stands for Clean Air, Water, and Land Act in War. The Clean Air, Water, and Land Act in War. The CAW law. Which means, if you're going to have war, you've got to keep the air clean, the water clean, the land clean, habitat life for animals and plants clean in your war. Somewhere along the line, maybe in religion, when men started thinking that they were created in God's image, or they created a God who created them in their image. You know, when people stopped worshiping the snake as a god, or another animal as a god, and they started worshiping God as a human-looking type thing. They started thinking of humans as number one, numero uno. Who cares what happens to the other animals, other species of life and plants? You know, if we want to wage war, it's worth it. It's not. These other species of life have a right to exist. And our job is to protect them. If we have any type of intelligence, which I doubt, but if we have anything, we should be using it to care for one another and to protect the animals and species of life, other plants that are here. And the non-species of life, the rocks, the water, the land. No, we have a snapping turtle. My son rescued him. His siblings had already been crushed by a car. And my son rescued him when biking home from work one day. And I've learned a lot about snapping turtles. They're thought of as aggressive, and they can be aggressive on land. Do you know why? Because snapping turtles can't get inside their shells. They're defenseless. And they can't swim away. If they're in water, they tend to swim away from the swimmers. They're not aggressive. But if you put them in a situation where they feel threatened, they can't swim, they can't tuck their head in, and then you get close to them, they can get aggressive. U.S. policymakers have to think about that with regard to Russia. Snapping turtles are great. They can be so friendly, sociable. You can pet them. You can pet their necks. You can pet their shells. I mean, once you become their friend, it's all possible. They're very nice. But the U.S., you know, it raises children to think of snakes and bats and spiders as, oh, dangerous. Kill them. So it creates this false stereotype, especially in boys' minds, that you've got these enemies you've got to fear. You not only have to fear them, but you've got to kill them. Okay, when they grow up, maybe they learn, okay, we don't have to fear them and kill them. But in that spot in their head, now they have the Russians or the terrorists. You've got to fear them, so you've got to kill them. It's a false fear that's created, and a false need for killing. A false need for hostility. When you could have friendship. Bats are super nice animals. Snakes are super gentle. They're caring. We've got to stop creating these patterns in our head and in our children's heads of prejudice, of creating false pictures of somebody to fear and hate. And it's time to start caring and loving for the other side, whether that other side is a conflict you're having in your home or your workplace or with Russia. And I hope my time is up. The camera's going to turn off. I want to thank you very, very much for listening. I'll have one more video where I show you all these charts put together. And I really hope, if you like any of these ideas, please take them or modify them and send them to people, please. We've got to do something while we still have a planet. Thank you very, very much. Good night.